InvestorIdeas.com podcasts.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com podcasts. In today's podcast, I'm going to be looking at a few public company announcements as well as some legislation changes in a few states, looking at Icanic Farms as well as Canopy Growth Corporation trading on the TSX as weed and the NASDAQ as CGC, Cleverleaf Holdings Incorporated trading on the NASDAQ as CLVR, and then again looking at both New York, New Mexico, and Virginia changes to legislation. So first, starting with Icanic Farms Incorporated, who was formerly Canadian Imperial Ventures Corporation, who announced that further to its news release from March 30th, the company has now received final approval from the Canadian Securities Exchange and will commence trading on the CSE under the ticker symbol IKNK beginning on April 6th of this year. I would like to thank our investors for their patience and everyone involved who helped us get to where we are today. We're excited for what lies ahead in our pursuit to deliver value to our shareholders, said Brian Baca, the CEO of Icanic. Now, the company has also remained focused on international operations and Latin America positioning, completing all certifications required to export pharmaceutical-grade cannabis, flower, and full-spectrum cannabis oil to international clients. And Icanic has also entered the global pharmaceutical cannabis market through its Colombian operations of Potcasts SAS, and will support the European Union and Latin American markets with flower and finished ingredient cannabis oil produced in its Casa Flores facility. Now, Potcasts was one of the first companies in Colombia to export THC for commercial sale and the first to export THC to Mexico, contributing to the legalization of the process in both respective countries when the process was complete. And it is also the first indoor vertical cultivator of pharmaceutical-grade cannabis producer in Colombia. Now, Icanic is also in the process of entering the Mexican cannabis market through the acquisition of Delta 9 Corporation in 2020, and through DNC, Icanic holds the sole legalized amparo in Mexico, permitting the importation and registration of cannabis and hemp seeds, legalizing the commercial process to cultivate, manufacture, distribute both finished and bulk products nationally. And the principals of D9C are seasoned regulatory and political experts who've been working hand in hand with the legislators and heads of government to advance the legal framework of cannabis legalization in the country. And the company is also set to open its first dispensary and consumption lounge in Palm Springs with the target opening of June of this year. And the dispensary features 2,200 square feet of retail space and 1,800 square feet of lounge, which will be designed to accommodate the post-COVID consumer through online order reservations, curbside pickup, and doorstep delivery options. And additionally, the company has also teamed up with snowboarding phenom Toby Miller to support and promote the Icanic CBD brand among the athletic community. And Toby has placed in the X Games before and has had an invitation list to compete at this year's invitation-only platform, along with earning a position on the U.S. snowboarder team for the men's halfpipe competition in the upcoming Winter Olympics. So a lot of good things going on for Icanic there. Obviously, stock trading on April 6th. That'll be next Tuesday. And a company that's very much focused on the international markets. Again, when you're looking at Colombia, Mexico, and Latin America right now, there is more and more competition heating up in that part of the world. Again, lots of expectation on that area being a big player in the international market, and especially it's providing a lot of products for the EU. It will be interesting to see how that all plays out. Right now, there's still a lot of speculation on when Mexico legalization is going to come into effect. Again, it is looking like it'll be sooner rather than later this year, but there is still a few processes that need to be finished off before that actually goes into effect. Companies like Icanic, as well as, again, a few others, are very poised to profit off of that almost immediately. And similar to what I discussed yesterday when it comes to brand ambassadors and CBD products, again, kind of following the same trend as the other company announcement I mentioned yesterday, having Toby Miller, another X Games sports athlete, be another brand ambassador from the athletic community supporting their CBD brand. Again, I do expect that the athletic community will be pretty much having a lot of different CBD sponsorships over the next couple of years as that does become more and more of the norm, especially when you're looking at overall training regimens and recovery time. CBD has been wildly effective in the athletic community. And again, as this becomes more normalized and as the FDA eventually clears up its regulations surrounding CBD, you're probably going to see more and more athletic endorsement of CBD products. Again, traditionally right now what you're seeing is the vast majority of more extreme sports who are endorsing or sponsoring or ambassadors to CBD products, but eventually that will probably leak over into the normalized athletic community. Again, the Olympics has actually endorsed CBD products. So I would expect more and more, again, of the athletic community to jump on board there. Looking next at Canopy Growth Corporation, who announced it's completed the acquisition of AV Cannabis Incorporated, or Ace Valley, one of Ontario's leading cannabis brands. So with a strong focus on ready-to-enjoy products and a loyalty following of millennial and Gen Z consumers, the acquisition will now strengthen Canopy's industry-leading house of brands. Now, through this acquisition, Canopy Growth will acquire 100% of Eighth Valley with the intention of leveraging the company's best-in-class national sales, marketing, and distribution capabilities to expand the product portfolio and scale the brand across Canada. The team at Ace Valley has built a premium cannabis brand with an impressive consumer following, and we're excited to deploy the full distribution power of Canopy Growth to expand the brand to consumers across Canada, said Ray Kovacevic, President and Chief Product Officer of Canopy Growth. Now, Ace Valley's complementary consumer positioning fits perfectly into Canopy Growth's strategy of building authentic brands that truly resonate with consumers. Now, Ace Valley holds top 5 and top 10 market positions on Ontario across its range of SKUs and complements Canopy Growth's existing portfolio of premium vapes, pre-roll joints, and gummies. And Ace Valley has carved out a leading position and a particularly strong following among millennial and Gen Z consumers. And this success to date is a perfect example of the continued valley of consumer-focused brands, confirming that many cannabis consumers are looking for premium, ready-to-enjoy products from brands they connect with. So Canopy Growth really following the trend we've seen over the last basically year and a half from a lot of these large-scale producers, where they're focusing less and less on their own large-scale production facilities and focusing more and more on acquiring premium craft brands. Again, when you're looking at Canopy Growth Corporation, Aurora, Afria, Tilray even, the vast majority of their success right now and the vast majority of their sales are still coming directly from these premium brands that they've acquired. Again, when you're looking at their bulk product that's going onto the market, it still is getting sales, but a lot of them are actually even being beaten out by, again, small to medium-sized producers. And the major reason for that is competition over price and quality. Again, even having one of these massive production facilities, there's a lot of overhead costs, and it does affect the overall end price point and, again, the quality as well, where you're seeing a lot of medium to small size cultivators just succeed much better in the market when you're looking at dried flower sales and even when you're looking at pre-rolls and next generation products. Again, I've talked about this many a time, but I do expect that eventually you'll see both the Canadian and US market look very similar to today's craft beer market, where you will have maybe a large brand company that owns a series of different small companies under them. And really that large company is just supplying the distribution and infrastructure. And all those brands are focusing specifically on their own niche products. Again, this is what we've seen in craft beer, in both wine, when you're looking at BC or Canada in general. Very similarly in a lot of the markets and successful states when you're looking at California and Colorado. And even Nevada, the craft beer market continues to be something that grows and dominates. And again, you look at a large beer producer, they're simply buying up these brands. That's similarly what I expect the cannabis industry is going to turn into, and moving away from large-scale production. Again, that when you look at the success rate for a lot of these companies and look at also where their revenue is coming from, the vast majority of it is not coming from these 1 million to 2 million square foot facilities. It's coming from a lot of their niche brands who are selling out much quicker and are getting a lot better recognition in the markets that they're going into. So very much on trend for Canopy Growth there. And next, looking at Clever Leaves Holdings Incorporated, who announced an agreement with Verdamed Holdings Incorporated, a Latin American pharmaceutical cannabis company based in Toronto, to supply finished CBD products to the Brazilian and Peruvian markets. And the initial portfolio of products includes finished formulations of CBD oral solutions with different concentrations used for different indications. Now, Verdamed supplies cannabis products in Brazil under the compassionate use model and has submitted applications to register finished products in Brazil and Peru. And the products manufactured under this partnership will be registered as pharmaceutical products and sold into distribution channels such as pharmacies and drugstores. Verdamed is an important player in the Brazilian market with existing access to patients and is well positioned to tackle the high regulatory hurdles in Brazil and Peru. This partnership expands Clever Leaves' presence in one of the largest markets in South America, said Kyle Detweiler, CEO of Clever Leaves, and we're committed to increasing access for the millions of patients with the growing Brazilian and Peruvian markets, and they will soon have access to the high-quality products we produce thanks to Verdamed Network. Now, the Brazilian and Peruvian markets are expanding, and it's estimated the Brazilian medical cannabis use base could reach close to 3 million people in the next few years. And according to Prohibition Partners, with a population of 32 million, Peru's medical cannabis market is estimated to be worth approximately 100 million. And as of September of 2020, almost 8,000 patients were registered in Digimed, Peru's drug regulatory authority database. So really, again, what we're looking at Clever Leaves holding there, just continuing that expansion of, again, Latin American focus right now. Again, there is a huge potential in those markets, both with the population density and, again, overall interest in cannabinoid medicine right now. A lot of difficulties when you're looking at Brazil, Peru, and most of the areas in Latin America right now when it comes to regulations. It is very strict, so these companies do need to focus on making sure that they are, crossing their I's, dotting their T's. But again, most companies, if you're going into that space, are focused on the entire international community, which is really just focusing on EU GMP certification. Again, companies who are not going to that level right now are just not going to be successful in the overall international market, as EU GMP standards do seem to be the global standard that cannabis will be adhering to. Again, most countries have not gone above those regulation requirements. So I would expect that even for Brazil and Peru, it's going to be very similar. And again, if these companies can succeed in other Latin American markets, then ideally they should be able to succeed in basically any legalized market in the world. And this is something that for a lot of US-based and Canadian-based companies, they're only now starting to consider. Again, a vast majority of them considered the international markets right out of the gate, especially larger scale producers. That being said, many of the smaller to medium-sized companies are now starting to realize that they are having to upgrade the overall quality of their facilities and the quality of their operations to meet these new global standards. And again, there is a possibility that these globalized standards eventually trickle back into the US and Canadian markets, and companies have to sort of upgrade their overall facilities. Lastly, today we look at new legalization news. So in the states of New York, Virginia, and New Mexico, they have put through new cannabis legislation. In New York, they legalized the use of recreational marijuana, enacting a robust program that will reinvest millions of dollars of tax revenues from cannabis into minority communities ravaged by the decades-long war on drugs. Governor Andrew Cuomo signed the cannabis legislation on Wednesday, a day after the state legislature passed the bill following hours of debate among lawmakers in Albany. And New York became the 15th state to legalize the recreational use of cannabis, positioning itself to quickly become one of the largest markets of legal cannabis in the nation, and one of the few states where legalization is directly tied to economic and racial equity. Now in New Mexico, lawmakers also approved a bill to legalize marijuana for adults during a special legislation session on Wednesday, sending the years in making legislation to the desk of Governor Michelle Grisham, who is expected to sign it into law. And lawmakers are also passed a separate legislation to expunge past convictions for low-level cannabis crimes. And legal retail sales of cannabis are scheduled to begin on April 1st of next year. This is a significant victory of New Mexico. Lujan Grisham said after the vote, "Workers will benefit from the opportunity to build careers in this new economy, and entrepreneurs will benefit from the opportunity to create lucrative new enterprises. And the state and local governments will benefit from the additional revenue, and consumers will benefit from the standardization and regulation that comes from a bona fide industry. And those who have been harmed by this country's failed war on drugs, disproportionately communities of color, will benefit from our state's smart, fair, and equitable new approach to past low-level convictions," she said. And finally, in Virginia, the governor on Thursday officially proposed pushing up the timeline to implement marijuana legislation, one of the series of amendments to reform legislation that he's submitting to lawmakers who will consider them next week. Now, Governor Ralph Northam also addressed concerns over provisions dealing with home cultivation, expungements of workers, and worker protections. And top legislators and reform advocates have been pushing for many of these changes, particularly moving up the effective date. The governor's proposal will make it so possession of cannabis by adults 21 and older will be legal on July 1st, rather than in 2024, as the measure currently stipulates. "Our Commonwealth is committed to legalizing marijuana in an equitable way," Northam said in a press release. "Virginia will become the 15th state to legalize marijuana, and these changes will ensure we do it in a focus of public safety, public health, and social justice. And I'm grateful for the advocates and legislators for their dedicated work on this important issue, and I look forward to the legalization passing next month." So obviously not going to be the 15th state now, but they should be the 16th or the 17th. I believe they'll be the 18th following New Mexico. So again, you're seeing pretty aggressive legalization changes in the U.S. Hopefully this pushes overall federal lawmakers to move towards some sort of federal guidelines. Again, MORE Act, States Act, SAFE Act, very likely one of those gets passed sooner rather than later. And hopefully, again, as more and more states push legalization, this just seems like a inevitable outcome. And for New York specifically, lots of companies poised to have some pretty aggressive growth now with the opening of the recreational market in that state. And there is a lot of expectation on the whole tri-state area opening up. And that'll be a big change for the overall cannabis industry when you're looking at both multi-state operators and smaller scale businesses. And again, a lot of the Canadian companies who have assets based in the US, a lot of them have been positioning themselves for New York legalization. So this will be a big change for, again, even companies like a Canopy Growth. And for New Mexico and Virginia, obviously a great change as well. And hopefully you do have, again, some sort of federal guideline changes in the next couple of months. But it does seem potentially that could be coming as late as next year. That will all probably depend on how quickly Mexico legislation goes through, as that does seem to be somewhat of a driving factor for the U.S. government to hurry up on, again, enacting at least one of those acts. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.